Hi, friends. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you can get something good. Welcome to the good world.
1, 2, 3.
So come on in to a place that is fun. I'll be your friend and you can be mine. The world is a stream of constant bullshit, but that doesn't mean there's not a whole lot of good shit. You start with the mean and we can make something different. Let's build a world that is good.
This is a show for adults. Hi, friends. Welcome to the good world. My name is Brother Seth. I am an ordained interfaith minister, and this is the good world, which is a show where we talk about not a world that is perfect, but a world that is good. So, if you watched my episode last week, you saw Emily Perez, who's the co-founder and managing director of the Sacramento Pop Choir. Emily is great. If you haven't watched or listened to that episode, I would encourage you to watch and listen to that episode. She had some really interesting things to say. She's also very funny. So this past weekend was the Pop Choir show. We talked about it in that episode, and it was really fun. It was a blast. There are around 300, a little under 300 people in the choir. So there are two choirs. There's the treble choir, which is only higher voices, and then there's the mixed choir, which is the full range soprano, alto, baritone. I'm a baritone. If you know anything about music and you hear the sound of my voice, it will not be surprising to you that I am a baritone. That means people with deep voices. Sometimes I'm a bass when that's available. So the first half of the show is the treble choir. Second half of the show is the mixed choir. And then the finale is that everybody comes together. So we had like 300 people on stage and an audience of over 800 people. So over 1,000 people packed into the theater at McClatchy High School in Sacramento. It was great. It sounded great. It was a lot of fun. The band was amazing. Everyone was great. I had a great time. This was my first time getting to sing a solo in the choir, which was really fun. So I got to sing with this 300 person choir behind me and a live band. It was a blast. I do not yet have video of the full thing, but when I do, I'll post it. Anyway, Pop Choir. It was a great experience. Emily and Heather, who's the musical director, who was not able to join us when we recorded, because she was sick at that point. She's better now. We recorded a few weeks ago. Emily and Heather built this organization from an idea. And that's a thing that Emily and I talked about a bunch in the episode last week. They had this idea of, hey, what if we built this choir? They were thinking maybe they could get it to 100 people and that would be amazing and that would be sustainable. And now it's 300 people and they're sort of expanding what they're doing and it's incredible. And they have built this really, really joyful community. And it has become, for me, a great way to get to know people. You know, I've been living in Sacramento now for 4.5 years. So Susie and I we've talked about this year. We've really started to feel like, okay, we live here. We have people, we have friends, we have places we like to go. We have routines in some cases. We have activities. We have all of these things in all of these communities. And it's great. And so for me, Pop Choir has really been one of those communities that has been really important. I've started to make more friends. I joined with one friend and she has introduced me to some other friends and now I have another friend who I've recruited who's joining next time, and I've made friends with other people who are in the choir, and it's great. And to me, I want to sort of zoom out to a bigger thing, because choir is an example of, you know, they didn't try to build the absolute best perfect choir. They tried to build a community. They tried to build something that was good. And as I said at the top, this show is called The Good World because it's about building the world we can have. And it's often, you know, throughout history, there have been ideas of utopian societies and we can make the world perfect. And that is a thing that you have seen on what I would very broadly call the political left and what I would also very broadly call the political right. And there are disagreements about how we get there, but a lot of people just say, well, if we could force everyone to do these things, then the world would be perfect. And a lot of what fascism pitches is that if we could force everyone to conform to a specific, nostalgic, and often sort of imagined reality of the way that the world used to be and has gotten away from, then the world could be perfect if only all of those bad people didn't present the problem of their existence. And I phrase it that way because other people's existence is not a problem. If you've been here with me and listened to me and or watched me, you know that I do not think other people's existence is a problem. I think it is a problem to figure out how to get along, especially in a world with 8 billion people where we are all often sort of running into each other. And where our needs can often collide with each other. But that does not mean that other people's existence is a problem. Other people exist, and it is kind of our responsibility to acknowledge that and to make space for them, because when we try, a big part of my, I would say, my theology and my philosophy, and a big part of my mission in this show and in sort of other things I do as an ordained interfaith minister is the idea that when we try to force people to fit into boxes, or we threaten them with violence, and sometimes, we do really serious harm to them. And history is full of examples of people who are saying, well, you're not going to conform, so we're going to hurt you, or we're going to kill you in some cases. And when we do that, it doesn't fix the thing. It doesn't make those people go away. Instead, it just causes a lot of pain that ends up bouncing around from those people to other people to other people. And so if you think of yourself as sort of standing in a room with a really big echo, if you scream at someone in that room with that big echo, and an echo chamber, if you will, then the sound is just going to bounce off, and it's going to be too loud for you too, right? It's going to bounce back on you too. Or if you're in a very, very tiny space and you have a very solid and very bouncy ball, if you throw it as hard as you can, it's going to bounce off the wall and it's going to hit you eventually. And so it is about a big part of my concern, and a big part of what I talk about is the fact that our actions have impacts on other people, right? I at some point grabbed, I have a Newton's cradle, right? You remember those toys, not tools? You pick up the ball and it swings and it hits this ball, and that ball hits this ball, that ball hits this ball, and then eventually this ball at the end swings out and it swings back. That is human interaction. That's a small scale model of human interaction. And so when I talk about the good world, I am thinking of a world in which we are acknowledging that is how human interaction works, that all of our actions bounce off of each other. And the way to calm and soothe all of the tension, all of the violence, all of the cruelty is A, to stop doing it ourselves, and B, to create a space where everyone can belong. And I started this episode talking about Emily and Pop Choir, and also Heather, but Emily is the one who was on this show. One of my very favorite things that she did, and I had not heard anyone do this before, Emily talked about the idea of expansiveness as opposed to inclusivity. And often in a lot of spaces that I've been in, we talk about, we want this to be an inclusive space. We want to include people. And I do think that's a great mission. I love the reframing of that as expansiveness, because then it stops being about, okay, we're making a space that other people can come into. And expansiveness is about, okay, well, how do we make a space and reach people where they are, where they actually are, instead of making them do any work to join us here. And look, sometimes people are going to have to do some work. To use choir as an example, if you are someone who loves singing and really wants to sing, but you have really, really bad stage fright, you're going to have to do some work on yourself to get in there, right? Other people aren't going to be able to do all of that for you, but they can make a space that facilitates that. They can make a space where you feel welcome and you feel supported. And so to me, when I hear this idea of expansiveness, I really, really love what that presents in terms of a model for things we can do at a larger scale. This is a 300-person choir. That's very large for a choir. It's not very large for a number of people in a world of 8 billion people. But it's a great model for a way that we can say, okay, well, different people have different needs. And Emily talked a lot about that, about the ways that there is music that is challenging for some people and easier for other people. And the way that it is a space that is designed to expand, to make room for people. And also sometimes we learn, oh, actually we need to, here are some people we didn't make space for. We didn't realize that. We thought we were making space, and it turns out these people have this other need. We didn't anticipate that. it is impossible for any of us to anticipate everyone else's needs all the time, right? And so sometimes you're going to fuck up like that. And part of the model is recognizing that and saying, oh, okay, my bad. Let's make some space for you too. And something that I have been thinking about a lot lately is in our society. So, I talked about, we often try to force people to conform. And that's a very common historical thing is we just say, well, these people are non-conforming, so we're just going to eradicate them. My grandparents are Holocaust survivors. I've talked about that on here before, right? There was an idea in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, an idea that really some fucking how is resurfacing today, but there's an idea that Jews control everything. And as a Jew, I assure you we do not. We have a very hard time controlling the decisions of a small group of us. Like there's a joke, I've maybe told this before, but it's like there's a Jewish guy gets lost at sea, gets stranded on an island, and he's there for years. And one day a boat happens to be passing by, they see him, they go up to the island, they pick him up, and they notice that there are two buildings. And they say, "Sir, what's that building over there?" And he goes, "Oh, that's the synagogue I go to." And they say, "Well, what's the other one?" And he says, "Oh, that's the one I wouldn't be caught dead in." Right? Jews do not agree, even within small groups, on anything. So I regret to inform you, it would be convenient if we controlled the world. It would be. I don't actually want to control the world because I don't think that would go well for any. I don't think any small group of people should control the world, and that includes billionaires and it includes presidents and kings. But that's not the reality. But anyway, so there's this tendency throughout history to try to eradicate the people who we blame, and we blame them and we say they're the problem, they're ruining everything. And another thing that has become very popular lately, which just really sucks, is the view that queerness and queer people, there's a belief that that's who's ruining everything. And we have even heard some of the most powerful and prominent people in the United States and in other countries say utterly unhinged things, frankly, about people who are queer or trans or gay or whatever. And the idea that people living differently are devaluing my life, that's not how the world works. My life, I am, to the extent that I can control my own life, I am responsible for it. And certainly someone else being different does not make my life worse. And in fact, it often makes it better. Another thing I talked about in my episode with Emily is that I love living in Sacramento because it's so diverse and that makes my life richer. There are so many different cultures that I get to interact with. And I really, really love that. It's also what I really love about travel. I get to see different cultures, different biomes and ecosystems, and just there are so many different ways for the world to be, and there's so many different ways for people to be within the world. Several years ago, Susie and I went to Namibia, which it's in southern Africa. And Namibia is mostly desert. It is the second least populated country in the world after Mongolia, or at least was last I knew, least densely populated, right? Highest ratio of land to people, Mongolia first, Namibia second. It's mostly desert, couple small cities. And I remember going there and being like, oh, desert's cool. I mean, I enjoy a desert. Like, deserts are really interesting places to visit. But what was crazy that Susie and I noticed as we were driving across Namibia is that there are so many different ways to be a desert. Like, you would get into one part and there would be these huge red dunes. That's one of the most famous things in Namibia. If you know anyone who's been to Namibia, they have probably been to Sossusvlei, which it's a major tourist attraction. There are these red sand dunes. They're huge dunes. And it's really cool. The sand is red because it started off yellow, and as it has been carried by the wind, it has oxidized, right? It has burned effectively, and that has rusted it and turned it red. And so that's why it's red. And when you get out to the coast, you have basically the same sand dunes, but earlier in that process, and so they're yellow. But in between, you have mountains. You have these crazy, like, depressions with I don't know, they look like ski moguls, like just these bumps all over the place. You have flat, open, like, just just vacant space with like very, very sparse vegetation. Like you can drive in Namibia for an hour and see probably 10 different kinds of desert. And so there are so many ways to be deserts in the world. There are also so many ways to be people in the world. And I made one of my attempts to be on TikTok is a video that I made, I think over the summer. And the premise of it is just, we get so upset when someone is being different, right? We are given this idea of you are supposed to be a certain way. And if we see someone else who is not being the way we think we're supposed to be, it really angers us. And so the question is, why does that anger us? Or at least for me, a question that I am interested in is the question of why that angers us. Why is it, for example, that if I, a cisgender, heterosexual, white man, if I wear a unicorn onesie, as I often do in the morning, I wear it like a bathrobe because it's very soft and very warm and very comfortable. And if you watch the theme song to this show, you can see an animated me in the unicorn onesie. You can go... Wait, I have a mug right here. Look, that's me in the unicorn onesie on the mug. The lighting is sending weird reflections. You can go to my merch store. Should we take a break here? Probably we should take a break here in a second. You can go to my merch store and you can get a t-shirt with me and picture of me in the unicorn onesie. Like it's a part of my life. And there are men who would see that and get very angry that I'm not being manly in the way that they have been taught is manly. And so again, my question is, where does that anger come from? And I think a lot of it just comes from when you have spent so much of your life being taught that the world is a certain way, and you are confronted with the possibility that it's not. That's upsetting. Right? You have devoted a lot of emotional energy to saying, well, I am told this is the box that I can fit in, and so I'm going to do everything I can to fit in the box. And then you look over and someone else has cut the box into pieces and fashioned it into a paper airplane, and they're now running around flying the box all over the place. And you're like, what the fuck? I have always been told we're supposed to get in the box. No one said anything about cutting up the box and using it as an airplane. That is infuriating. Get in the box. Why aren't you in the box? And so that is where I think a lot of that anger comes from. I think part of it is that. And I also think part of it is the idea that it calls into question the things you have been taught by the people that you trusted, right? And so if you grew up and your parents... I'll put myself in this analogy. If I grow up and my parents tell me, well, this thing in the world is the way that this is, and I love my parents and I trust my parents, and for a very, very long time, my parents were responsible for my survival and succeeded in ensuring that I survived. And if I suddenly learn that they told me something that is completely wrong, then I have to question, are they wrong? When I've spent my entire life thinking that they know so much and looking up to them? Do they know, but they're being malicious and they were lying to me? That's worse. Right? And there's not a whole lot else until you sort of get to the point of like, oh, well, I guess maybe my parents are people too, and people make mistakes, and the history of humanity is making mistakes and learning from them. So I think that is where that anger comes from, is this idea of, oh, you shouldn't be like, I have put so much energy into the idea that I have to be in the box. So when someone else cuts up the box and uses it as an airplane, it is deeply upsetting to me because it calls into question my entire life. That's very threatening. That's very scary. I don't want to be threatened. I don't want to be scared. It's much easier to say, no, you're doing it wrong. You are living wrong. And so I understand that. I understand where that comes from. And so this TikTok video I mentioned, it's me in my unicorn onesie, and I go, oh no, someone is being different. Because I think that is what a lot of the reaction around us to people being different is, right? It's just, oh no, someone is being different, and we don't know what to do with that. And for me, I have personally done a lot of work to get to the point of, I guess it's fine. I think it's actually fine. If someone is being different, I think it's as long as they are not doing things that harm me, which for the most part, other people are not. Other people are just trying to live their lives. And so a thing that I have specifically been thinking about, I mentioned the demonization of queer people, particularly the demonization of trans people and non-binary people, and the idea of, oh, you're telling me I'm supposed to use different pronouns? I understand that. When I first heard it, I was like, what are you talking about, they, them? My entire life, everyone has been a he or a she. What is this they, them? And then I got to a point where I was like, yeah, I guess it's fine, actually. I don't need to police other people's identity. If they genuinely feel that they, them is more representative of who they are, cool. There was a time in my life I didn't like my name Seth growing up. I was like, Seth. Now I've come to like it. Also, it's very alliterative with my last name, Seth Samuels. There's a lot of S sounds. It's very flowy. But when I was in high school, I was like, nah, I don't know. Maybe I should go by my middle name. And I got to college. My middle name is Benjamin. And when I got to college, my roommate was Ben and our next door neighbor was Ben. And I was like, I guess I'm not going by Ben. But there was a time that I thought maybe I'll go by Ben. And I don't really see how that's different. I don't really see how it's different to say, well, I know my name is William, but I want you to call me Bill. We do that all the time. If someone says, I know you look at me and think that I'm she, her, but I would rather you call me they, them, it's kind of the same thing. It is. Doesn't hurt me to do that. It takes a little bit of extra thought, right? And that can be frustrating because we're all like, everything is exhausting all the time. And so I understand why we might feel some hesitancy or even just some initial pushback of like, you're telling me I have to do another damn thing. I have to think about other people in another damn way. And I'm saying, look, you don't have to do anything, but you can. There's nothing preventing you from making space for people. And if you make space for people, it will improve your life. You will have deeper connection. You will have more friends. It is a good thing. And a thing that I have been thinking about that is sort of prompting what I am saying here is when I think about my queer friends, I think that they are the most joyful people I know, on average. Everyone has issues that they're dealing with. But to live in a world that says, no, the way you are being is wrong. And to say, yeah, it just feels right to me, so I'm going to do it anyway. Like that is loving yourself, and that is living with joy. And it's not an easy thing to do. And so I think some of the most authentic joy that I encounter is from my queer friends who have figured out how to, it doesn't mean they're not scared when people threaten them. And especially right now in our society, a lot of people, including some very powerful people, are saying some extremely threatening things towards my queer friends. And that is fucked up. I would like it if it stopped. What I would like to do here is just express that in opening myself up to the idea that people can be different, and instead of rejecting it flat out, I can get to know them, and I can learn about different ways to be a person, and that has enriched my life. You can do that same thing. We can all do that. We don't have to shut people down for being different. We don't have to shut people down because we have been told our entire lives that we need to fit in the box if they are using the box for art. Right? And I also want to say, we've been told our entire lives that we have to fit in a box. That sucks. That's bullshit. Like if you are a person like me who has been told this is what, well, I have been told this less. I will concede that. My life path has taken me in ways where I've been exposed to a lot of people being different and been told that it's fine and been able to see that it's fine. But if you do not have the fortune of having been sort of taken through life in that way, yeah, if you're just told, here's the box, you got to fit in it, like that really sucks. And you put in so much work to fit into that box, only now you're finding out you didn't need to do any of it. And in fact, you could have actually had a lot of fun if you were given the freedom to play with the box and make art. And so that's also a thing that's going to naturally give us some anger, right? It's like, I did all of this work. I didn't even need to do that. I have been struggling to fit into the box. The box is a specific shape. I had to contort my body to fit in the box. I didn't even need to do that. Of course you're going to be angry. But the problem is not the people who learned earlier in life that they didn't have to fit in the box. The problem is the box. And being able to use the box as a way to explore yourself and your world, that has value, and that is a form of loving yourself. And it's really powerful, right? Loving yourself is an incredibly powerful thing, and it is something we are not taught to do. Or we're taught that it means like something bad, right? We're taught that like loving yourself is giving into every urge. It doesn't mean that, right? I have a sweet tooth. Self-love for me doesn't mean eating candy all the time, because that will give me diabetes. Loving myself means honoring myself and recognizing the parts of myself that are me and loving them. And my craving for candy is not a deep intrinsic part of me, but my identity is. And so I can love that, and I can celebrate that, and I can find ways to express myself that include, sometimes wearing plaid shirts and a big beard on YouTube, and sometimes taking my big beard and putting on a unicorn onesie or singing in a choir or anything like that. We're going to take a break right there. That's a good place. I've been talking for a while. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe.
Yes, friends, that jingle is a reminder to please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this with your friends and family. You can go to my Patreon. You can support me financially, maybe. That would be nice and appreciated. You can also go to my merch store. You can get merch like this t-shirt or this mug. Love my mug. Susie, my spouse, was drinking coffee out of one of these mugs yesterday, and she told me she woke up feeling very cranky because one of our dogs, Pulpo, had climbed on our bed and started pawing her in the face, which is a thing he does sometimes at like 5:30 in the morning. And so she got up because she was like, well, I guess I'm awake now. And she went to the kitchen and she got some coffee and she drank it out of my face. This side, regular face. This side, unicorn face. This side. Let's build a world that is good. Get yourself a mug. Anything you can do to support the show, I would really appreciate, because I want to keep doing this. It's fun. I enjoy doing it. Okay, so right before the break, I was talking about loving ourselves, and very, very famous line from, this is the kind of thing as a minister I should know, love your neighbor as yourself. I think the earliest person that's attributed to is Rabbi Hillel. He's asked, it's a good story. So Rabbi Hillel, who was a Jewish rabbi in Jerusalem or somewhere around that kingdom of Judea 2,000 years ago. There are some people who believe that maybe Hillel was Jesus's rabbi. I have zero evidence to support that other than it's a thing that I've heard, and they lived in kind of the same place at pretty much the same time and said some of the same things. So like that's not zero evidence, but it's not hard evidence. So someone came up to Hillel and said, Rabbi, I have a challenge for you. Can you teach me the entire Torah while standing on one foot? And the Torah is it's 5 books. It's a lot of words. And so trying to teach all of that while standing on one foot would require some pretty impressive balance. And also, like, you'd have to go about your life still standing on one foot. You'd have to stop to eat and drink and all of these things. And instead, Hillel just goes, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That's the entirety of Torah. Go on your way. He stands on one foot, and he says that. And Jesus said something to the effect of, love your neighbor as yourself. Right. And so these are basically the same message from 2 different people at roughly the same period in time. So I am certain that for most of you, love your neighbor as yourself will be a familiar teaching. And there are 2 pieces to it, right? There is love your neighbor, but there's also as yourself. As yourself implies that you love yourself. And so I was talking about loving myself for me does not mean eating sugar whenever I encounter sugar. It means taking care of my body and being able to, sometimes I can have some sugar because it's fine. Everything is fine in moderation, pretty much. But if I eat some vegetables, I can take care of myself. And so that's a way to love myself. And so loving your neighbor as yourself also means, in the same way I said loving yourself can mean honoring the parts of yourself that are true, loving your neighbor as yourself means honoring your neighbors when they tell you that something is true about them. We don't have to challenge or debate them. And particularly if you, like me, have sort of, you have some, fancy education background and you've grown up in sort of a certain socioeconomic stratum, you will have heard over and over the idea that we need to debate, everything needs to be debated. And remarkably, when I when I feel a certain way, when I feel angry, people don't tend to debate the validity of my anger. But if someone says, I actually don't feel like a man, I feel like a woman, we debate whether they have the right to do that. So there is something in, even just within the idea of debate and free speech, there are some things that are automatically accepted and some things that are automatically questioned, and they are not equal. And the people whose truths are questioned are not in the same positions of privilege that someone like me is in. So let's start right there when we're talking about debate and free speech and all of those things. But something else that I have learned is just, if someone tells me that something is true about their identity, I don't have to question it. I don't have to argue with them that maybe they're lying, because who does that? Like, what kind of sociopath is going around pretending to have an identity that they do not? If someone tells me this is my identity, I can just believe them. And look, maybe at some point they'll decide that something else is their identity. They get to do that. It is okay. When I was a child, I dressed up as a cowboy and I was like, I'm a cowboy today. And then the next day I dressed up as a baseball player and I was like, I'm a baseball player. And no one was like, well, are you a baseball player? Right? It's okay. It's fine. It's okay to accept people for who they are in this moment, and people are going to change, and sometimes they'll change back, and that's okay. What matters is that we are letting them guide themselves, and that's a hard thing to do, but that's what actually is important here, and that is loving our neighbors as ourselves. That is a world that is good. And so continuing with this idea of building a world that is good, not a world that is perfect. It's like, okay, what can we do within the parameters of the world as it actually exists, right? We are never going to make it. There are people who say that we're going to get rid of death. I am skeptical of that, but I also think, and I've talked about this before, I also think it's not a good thing. There's a whole teaching in the Torah that comes up on Yom Kippur about if we could suddenly end death for everyone, but with the condition that no new people would ever be born, the answer would be obvious. If we were put in a situation where it's like, well, there will never again be a first love, a first time eating ice cream, a first time seeing a rainbow, none of the wonder of a new child in exchange for eternal life. That sounds terrible. And a life in which you live forever is just for the sake of living forever is meaningless. And death, I have an episode coming up with two friends who, they have a podcast about death and dying. And death is part of life. And it's a good part of life. It is part of the process that produces new life. So there are some things we're not going to get rid of, or at least shouldn't get rid of. But that doesn't mean we don't grieve, right? That doesn't mean we're going to get rid of sadness. We're going to get rid of emotional pain. Like loss is hard and it is real, and it's not a thing we're going to get rid of. But there are things we can get rid of. And something that I hear a lot, and I think that this ties into what I was saying earlier about getting in the box, is we often have this view that because things have been a certain way, that they have to continue to be a certain way. And so recently I saw something where someone was like, well, we can't get rid of competition for food because there is scarcity, and all throughout history, life has been about competing for food and competing for survival. Look, that's true. Life for billions of years has evolved through some things living and some things dying and competing for scarce resources. We as a species have done something incredible, which is that we have solved scarcity. There is enough food for everybody. There's enough housing and clothing. There's enough for everybody. It's amazing what we have been able to do. And we are told, well, but competition is part of life. We can't get rid of competition. And there's scarcity. And so we have this economic system in which we have now created scarcity, right? We have a wealth distribution that is wildly unequal, where some people have literally billions of dollars and some people are starving on the streets, in sometimes way over their head in debt. Not equal. And these people are in a forced position of scarcity, not because there's not enough food for them, but because we think, well, if they can eat, how are we going to get them to do the things we want them to do? How are we going to force and coerce people to do things that we think they should do if we don't starve them? Or if we don't at least use the threat of starvation? Think about how fucked up that is. That is what a mobster does, right? A mobster comes to your business and says, hey, nice store you got here. This is a terrible accent. Nice store you got here. Be a shame if something happened to it. Me and my boy Mickey over here with the baseball bat, we'll make sure nothing happens to it, if you know what I mean. And then you pay the mobster and they don't destroy your store. That's extortion. That is also the economic model of manufactured scarcity. Like, we don't actually have the limited resources to require scarcity. We're just doing it because, well, there has always been scarcity, and what are we going to do if people have their needs met? And the answer, in my view, is that if people's needs met, we'll get to see what they do. We'll give them the opportunity that we claim to value. We'll give them the freedom that we claim to value. We will actually give that to people if we meet their needs. And we're saying, no, we can't do that. We can't have people be free to not do these miserable, low-paying jobs. We have to have the threat of homelessness, the threat of poverty, the threat of hunger, the threat of dying of starvation. We have to threaten people so that they'll live in the way that we think is important. That is just the same thing as forcing people into the box. And look, whatever the transition looks like from a world of scarcity to a world of abundance, that's going to be a challenge to figure out. But first, we need to agree that we have this opportunity to move in that direction. And again, just because things have always been a certain way does not mean that they have to be that way forever. Just because life has always been a competition for scarcity doesn't mean we can't change that. We have created agriculture and cities. We have changed lots of things. So meeting people's needs when we can, we have the ability to do it, is kind of a responsibility. It's kind of the least that we owe each other, is to just say, yeah, you know what? I actually don't think that anyone should be extorted by the threat of starvation and by the threat of violence. I don't think people should be extorted into performing cheap labor. I think people should actually get freedom and autonomy, and you know, it'll take us some time to figure it out, but we'll figure it out. We figure out lots of things all the time. A related thing is I also saw a post recently in which someone said, you know, we're always told violence is not the answer, and I always thought that, and then I looked at history and it turns out violence is the answer. And look, I am not going to claim that history is not full of people doing violent things to get their way, and often it has been effective. I think at a certain point the violence starts to turn back on itself. Right, at a certain point, the more violence you are enacting to get your way, eventually people are going to get sick of it and come after you, if they haven't from the get-go. And so you're not going to create a stable situation for yourself, because like a mob boss, hey, I can use this analogy again, like a mob boss, if you have a lot of people out there with vendettas against you and grudges against you because you've killed their friends or their family or tried to kill them or whatever. You are spending your entire life afraid that someone's going to try to kill you. That is also not freedom. That is not fun for you. This, for me, is a big reason not to use violence. But I understand why people think it is effective, because it has often been effective in at least sort of discrete chunks. In the long run, it really does often tend to blow back on people. And so I have reached a point where I am not trying to condemn people or tell people how to react, certainly to the violence that they experience, right? And I've talked here before about the violence of the violent experience of people who are unhoused, of people who are hungry. Violence is a word for all the things I was just talking about for being extorted and coerced into being cheap labor, right? It's the threat of violence. Actual physical violence. And so if someone is experiencing that violence, I'm not going to tell them how to respond to it. My view is, as someone who is in a position where, I grew up around a lot of people who are in various positions of privilege and power and authority in governments and in corporations and in all kinds of things. And my view is that I'm saying, hey, this is all getting really unfair, and if we don't fix it, things are going to get ugly. Right? The French Revolution, I saw something recently that we are currently at a place where the economic inequality is worse than it was right before the French Revolution. I don't know if that's true. Time out. I fact-checked it, and currently inequality in the U.S. is not as bad as it was during the French Revolution, though it is still very bad. Current inequality in South Africa, the most unequal country in the world, is slightly worse than before the French Revolution. So now we have an actual fact. It's one that actually is tangential to the point I was about to make. Anyway, okay, back to the show. And if your response to the French Revolution is to say, no, poor people of France, you should not be using violence, you should be marching, I think you're missing the point. I think you are missing the absolute misery that the poor people of France were experiencing while their leaders were living in absurd luxury. I don't know if I have traveled to the Palace of Versailles. It's ridiculous. It's very opulent. And we don't need, if you are in a situation where you cannot put food on your table and someone else is eating off of a golden table and throwing away half the food because they don't care, and they're going to tell you how to respond to it, that's not going to go well. And so my view is not to say, hey, let's rise up. My view is to say, hey, people like me who have a little bit more access, let's recognize that this is really bad and let's fix this problem before it boils over, right? Boiling over is a great analogy. If you have ever made pasta, I don't know why. Anytime I make pasta, the water boils over. Right, it comes over the top of the pot and it gets into the flame on the stove, and it's noisy and it's bad and it's unpleasant, and I often fail to notice when the water is starting to pick up a boil. I think it's because I put the lid on to make it heat up faster, which is great until it boils over. If I paid attention to the pot before it reached that point and fixed the situation by removing the lid and therefore creating more space and less pressure, then it wouldn't boil over. And so if we look at the collective social crock pot that we're living in, Dutch oven, it's a pot. We're all living in a pot. Melting pot, certainly an analogy that has been used plenty. If you look at this pot and you notice, hey, that boil is starting to get really, really close to the top, it's not really going to help if you just stand there and say, no, stop it. Stop boiling. You just need to work harder, water. Like, that's not going to work. You need to actually reduce the pressure and reduce the tension. You need to turn the temperature down. And the way to do that is to stop making it so that people are having to destroy their bodies just to exist. You stop creating this situation where people are violently coerced into doing the kinds of labor that we don't want to do ourselves, because that's a lot of what's going on. And so it is very important to me. I really don't like violence. I am very afraid of violence. I am a peace and love guy. And so to me, the most nonviolent thing I can do in this moment is to look at the people who are feeling increasingly angry and increasingly shortchanged and say, hey, let's meet your needs. We don't actually have to make their lives worse. We can make life better for everybody. There's enough stuff. We can make life better for everybody. We just need to choose to do it. And instead we're being told to fight over the fact that our neighbors are being different. Our neighbors being different is not the problem. The problem is that people are struggling just to survive and don't need to. And that builds up a lot of resentment. And if we want to fix that resentment, it's not enough to lecture people. We need to actually meet their needs. We need to give them the things that they need. And again, big part of why we don't do that is we're like, well, it's always been that way. Okay, now it's not. Right? It's not some permanent law. The only laws are the laws of physics. Everything else is politics. Right? If I take this little stress ball uterus that I showed you last week and I throw it on my desk, it bounces. You couldn't see it bounce probably, but it bounced. That's a law of physics. If I'm allocating food, that's politics. The only actual true laws are the laws of physics. Everything else is politics. We have solved scarcity as a species. And yet we've somehow simultaneously, we've invented this thing called economics, and the flavor of economics we have has always used scarcity as a cudgel and as a way to extort people. And so people say there's no other option. There's no other option. Things have always been this way. But the way things have been are not the way things have to be. Right? Yes, there has been racism and tribalism and inequality and poverty and war and hunger, and we can let go of those things. We don't have to be controlled by the past. We can make a decision to live differently. We can embrace our own freedom. Just because things used to be different doesn't mean they always have to be that way. The first time someone planted a farm, I'm sure someone else was there to say, well, we've always had to go and forage for food and hunt or else we'd starve. So you shouldn't have a farm. No, the person who made the farm realized, hey, it doesn't have to be that way. We can actually just hang out and enjoy the beautiful weather, and we can grow carrots and beets or corn, whatever else they were growing. In my yard, we just planted a bunch of garlic in my garden. Very excited for the garlic to come in the spring. Right? We don't have to be constrained by the way that things have always been. We can imagine a different future for ourselves, but we have to make a decision to do that. We don't have to accept the limits we have been given. We don't have to repeat the pain of our ancestors just because that's how we were conditioned. We can build something better. We can build a world that is good. All right, I'm going to end there. Really got going today. Well, thank you, friend, for your visit today. Now it's time we both go on our way. The world will still be insane tomorrow, but don't let that fill your heart with sorrow. You can thrive in a desert, just ask a saguaro. Please give to my Patreon. Capitalism is fun. Let's build a world that is good. This is a show for adults. Thank you, friends. See you next week.